All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Alpha Obeisance channel. This is episode 9 in a Noob's Guide to Hyprland. It's my best attempt to make Hyprland as easily accessible to new users or less experienced users, or as we call them, noobs. And I mean that in the best possible way. I was a noob myself, so there's no judgment here. Definitely making these guides for my 14-year-old who's taken an interest in Hyprland after I had gotten into it. He'd like to make his own desktop, but as mentioned previously, it's next to impossible to get a teenager to focus on anything, so with any luck, I'm making these interestingly enough for him to stick into it and follow along and learn to configure his own system because Daddy's tired of doing it for him. Anyway, I digress. Hopefully you guys are learning as you go along as well. If you are, definitely consider hitting that like button because it lets me and my kid know that Dad did something right and maybe he should focus. And I sure hope that that's the case. I'd hate to mislead anybody or miseducate anybody, but I'm doing the best I can with the knowledge I have. And without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into it. If you'd like to follow along at home, you can download the dot files in the link in the description below. If you do choose to do that and use my dot files, my configuration files, definitely consider starting at the beginning of this guide because I walk you through how to set up my configuration files for use with your hardware. We're talking most specifically monitor configuration. That way when you apply it to your desktop, your stuff doesn't go all wonky on you. So definitely consider that. Anyway, moving on, let's dive straight into window rules. It's the last configuration within the configuration directory in our parent hyper directory. Noob note indicates window rules in Hyprland. Help you control how windows behave in Hyprland, including what workspaces they open on, how they appear, and what special behaviors they have. For example, you can force certain apps to always open on specific workspace, make them float, or change their opacity. Going to go ahead and scroll down here. We've got a few dev fixes. I'd go ahead and leave these alone. These are actually here by default when you install Hyprland, and if the developers think you're probably going to appreciate it, I'd say it's probably safe to say you should probably not touch them. You're probably going to appreciate them, and they literally tell you you'll probably like this. So moving on, we've got workspaces. This is what I use. Yours should be, provided I cleaned up the configurations properly. You should see more of a naked area here, but the concept is still the same. I've got it categorized by workspace 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. If you want to restrict an application to a certain workspace, it's really simple. You use window rule version 2 equals workspace, your desired workspace here. Don't forget the comma after that, and your class with a colon and your class name. Now you're wondering, dude, how do I get the class name? Don't get your panties twisted. Come on, I'm holding your hand. I told you I would. Let's go ahead and open up a terminal here. We're going to clear that out, and we're going to type, oh, before we do this, let's not get ahead of ourselves. All right, so before we do this, let's pretend you want to let's say Steam. You want Steam to open on a specific window. So we're going to go ahead and go to my Steam desktop, and we're going to open Steam here, make sure it's running, and then we're going to go back to our terminal here, and now we can type hyper control. That's HYPRCTL space clients. And then when you press enter, it's going to give you a list of open windows, and we're going to scroll up this list and look for Steam. Where are you at? And depending on how many windows you've got, you're going to have a long list like I do. So we've found Steam here. It's window 597260M, yada, 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 blah, blah. We only care about Steam here. We're going to go down and look for class and title. These are case sensitive, so keep that in mind when you're setting these rules. You can see that class is Steam all lowercase, where title is Steam with a capital S, so keep that in mind. And you can see here where I did this very same thing, where Steam will open on workspace 3 by setting window rule version 2 equals workspace 3 silent. This is a flag that you can add, which will basically, you can open Steam on any given application, or excuse me, any given workspace, and it's not going to steal the attention of your workspace the moment that Steam opens. So if you notice that, oh, I'm making this application open on this window, but every time I open the application, it's snagging my workspace. It's dragging me to that active window. You just add the silent flag in front of that, and it'll open, like, for example, if I go over here and I close Steam, now it's clearly closed, but if I run Steam, it's not going to steal my window. But if we go back over here, you can see that it's open. So hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask in the comment section below. Let's see here. That's pretty much it, guys. I like to include both the class and the title. I'm just super anal that way. I like to make sure that I'm being super forceful about my window rules. So I generally include the class and title. So that's pretty much it. Feel free to experiment as you will. All you got to do is open the application you wish to send to whichever workspace you'd like, and make sure that it's open before you run hypercontrol clients, and that is how you grab those details. If we scroll down, we've got opacity. So I don't use this anymore. I used to have a laundry list of applications in here, but then one day, in fact, it was today while I was making this tutorial, I was like, yo, dude, like, you've got all of your applications that you use all the time set to the exact same opacity. Why not just set that to default in the aesthetic setting? So I no longer use opacity in this case, but it would be coming in handy if, let's say, you have an application you don't use that frequently and you don't have, say, global settings for opacity set. You could set them here. And I do think that I actually have an example in your guys' configuration. If I remember to, probably unlikely I'm going to remember to, but if I do remember to, I'll make sure to add one if it's not there. Next, we've got float. For example, if I open PavView control for volume control, you see it opens with a floating window. I can do whatever I want, resize it, yada yada. This is a floating window. If you want to make sure that a certain application like PavView control or NWG look for theming opens up in a floating window, you can go ahead and do that in the floating section with window rule version 2 equals float, comma, don't forget that comma. Then you do the same exact thing. You add the class and the title, and you're good to go. It'll force that window into floating mode upon launch. I'm not sure why I have these games. I think I was doing some experimentation, so we're going to go ahead and delete that before I forget. Moving on to full screen, same exact thing. Window rule version 2 equals full screen. You guessed it, with that comma behind it. Then you add the class, and if you choose to, title as well. Restrictions and omissions. So if you want to restrict certain windows from having access to certain features or visual aesthetics like no animation, no initial focus, you can go ahead and window rule version 2 equals no anim. For animation, don't forget your comma. In no initial focus is pretty self-explanatory. Window rule version 2 equals no initial focus. Don't forget that comma. I'm saying that for a reason, okay? If it's not working, definitely check your syntax. If you're missing a comma in appropriate spaces, it's not going to work. Same goes for your colons and any other punctuations that are relevant to the string. So if it's not working, don't blame me. It's a good chance that there's a syntax issue. It happens to me literally every single time that I mess with my configuration. So it happens to the best of us. Max window size. This is relevant if you get a window that every time you open it, say you open it in floating mode, it just takes up the whole screen. You can restrict its max window size. This is really good if you're wanting to create a floating theme workspace. Let's say we put a bunch of applications to workspace 4 and we restrict all of those applications into forcing them into a floating mode. We can set the max and minimum window size so that when they open up, if I remember right, they tend to remember where they were last opened up. So you can more or less create a floating window theme on a certain workspace by doing this. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. But and last but not least, we've got no window blur. If you don't want a certain application to have window blur, you can disable it here with window rule version 2 equals no blur. And that pretty much sums it up for window rules, guys. I Hope you found that useful. If you did, definitely consider hitting that like button. I'd really appreciate it. It lets my 14-year-old know that his old dad did something right, and hopefully you guys would support me in trying to get him to focus on this. So those likes really do help me out, because if my kid sees it, maybe it'll motivate him. So yeah, without further ado, any questions, comments, concerns, or corrections, drop them in the comments section below. We're gonna one more video, at least for now, that we're gonna be doing to wrap this guide up, and we're going to kind of button things up and cover a few features that I promise you're going to want to have. So thank you for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you guys. If you like the video, consider hitting that subscribe button. If you want to see future videos and be notified, hit that bell, and we'll catch you in the next video. Take care. God bless.